And now I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Jeremy Markovich. We first got to know Jeremy in 2019 when he wrote a gorgeous 20-plus page story for Our State magazine about the trail. He's an award-winning writer, producer, and journalist whose work has won 2 regional Emmys and has appeared in CBS Sports, SB Nation, and Charlotte Magazine. He's been writing for Our State magazine for a decade now, and his podcast, Away Message, wrapped up its 4th season with an in-depth look at 3 hikers who set out to complete the MST. Jeremy is originally from Ohio and now lives outside Greensboro, along the MST with his wife, kids, and their dog. Jeremy is live in the room with us here at the museum. Jeremy.
Hello, hope you all can hear me. I want to tell you all thank you so much for having me here today. It was funny. I was last year as I was kind of preparing for to come up with this podcast season. I planned to come to the gathering, and then that didn't happen. So now I'm here. I'm really happy to be here in Raleigh and to have made the trip and to see you all today. And I figured what I would do today is kind of tell you a little about who I am, a little bit about how what I do at Our State. Took to do it. I don't know how much you all know about how to make a podcast, but how to make it, how to tell a story about somebody hiking across the state, and lastly, kind of tell you about what I learned, because I really, I am lucky enough to work for Our State magazine, where you get to learn everything about the state. I mean, the great thing about being a journalist is that you get to dive into all sorts of different things, and I was sort of aware. I knew about the Mountains to Sea Trail. I kind of knew the highlights or the bullet points, I want to say, of what the trail was, but I didn't know a ton about it, about how it worked and who builds it and who maintains it and who makes it all happen. And I am lucky and just really blessed to have been able to learn so much about it and meet a lot of you, actually. I think that maybe even are on this call. So but just really quickly to kind of start. So yeah, I'm from Ohio. That's why I talk maybe like a Clevelander if y'all are from up there. But my background is I worked in television. I went to college to be a broadcast journalist, and I worked at television stations in Charlotte and in Charleston, West Virginia, before I ended up starting writing for Our State 6 years ago, but I'd been writing stories for them. I just started as something I just kind of wanted to do on the side, and it grew from there. And the great thing was, I'd been on local television for a while. There is you don't get that much time to really delve into a whole lot of things. You get maybe a minute to tell your story. And my job really had been writing for other people. If you're wondering what a producer does in television, I write the words that somebody else reads off of a teleprompter. So that was kind of my job for a very long time. So I had been writing for a long time, had been telling stories, editing stories in television. And when then, the job came open to work full-time at Our State magazine, I jumped on it and was really, really happy to work there. And, for the first couple of years, I became sort of the de facto outdoors guy. They had me, they were like, hey, we want to do a story about the Cape Fear River. Do you think you could kayak it? And I was like, how much of it? And they were like, well, like all of it. So we planned an 8-day trip, and we started at Jordan Lake right at the dam and went all the way down to Southport, and wrote a big, long story about that. And the nice thing is when you were on staff at a magazine like that, the one thing that you may not realize about Our State, other than it is wonderful, and if you don't have a subscription, please go get one. But that most of the people that are writing in the magazine are freelancers, and they're all over the state. There's a stable of them, and they're all great and wonderful. But the nice thing is about it being on staff there is I could kind of take chances. I could maybe take 8 days and kayak down the Cape Fear River and see how that goes, and figure out what the story is, and work very closely with the very talented writers and editors that are on staff there as well. So that allowed me to kind of take some chances. And in 2017. I kind of made this pitch, and I said, I have a background in broadcasting. I'm going to a lot of places all around the state. I mean, I'm just traveling quite a bit. And what if instead of when I interview people, I just kind of shove my iPhone. So usually I would be like, hey, I want to record this so I know exactly what you're saying. I'm going to just hold my iPhone up like this, maybe not that close, but somewhere up like that. And so that way later I can write down the exact quote. What if I got a really nice microphone and a really nice recorder, and I was able to start recording that way, and we could make a podcast out of it. Podcast seems like they're pretty great, and so they're like, how much is this going to cost us? I'm like, nothing really. And they said, sure, go knock yourself out. So I started to do that, and the first season of Away Message started in 2017. We did 8 episodes. A lot of them were about the most remote places in the state, out in the Great Smoky Mountains. Did one up on top of a television tower. Went out to the coast and found a shipwreck. And one of the things that we kind of got to the 4th season, and we said to ourselves, like, we've kind of done these little contained kind of one-off stories. Like every episode is fully contained. If you missed one, you're not missing anything. It's not like your favorite TV show. But what if we could do a story and really get in depth about something, where we could really just kind of dive in and just tell this really long, involved story that really, really means a lot. And what would that be about North Carolina? And so we talked a little bit about it, and we said, well, like I'm really fascinated by the Mountains of Sea Trail. I would love to know how it works. And the great thing about like this trail, it runs from the Tennessee border all the way out to the Outer Banks, crosses the entire state. It goes through the mountains, it goes through the Piedmont, it goes around cities, it goes down to the coastal plain and up the beach. Like it really has footpath. Parts of it you can kayak, parts of it you're on the roadside. So I'm like, and this really is an opportunity not just to tell the story about a trail, but to tell the story of North Carolina and really what it's like to walk across it. What you see it when, I mean, I've driven all over the state, and there's lots of places I've been to, but there's a lot of places that I've kind of just looked over and you see when you're going by. What if you really slowed down and could do this? And so he said, this would be great. So as Betsy had kind of said, I was working on a story for the print magazine, and I told Betsy and Kate, I was like, hey, I need you to do me a big favor. Can you please, if somebody calls your office or gets in touch with you and says, we're going to hike the whole thing, how do we do it? Obviously you'll help them, but then you could say, do you mind being like a guinea pig? I'm going to put you in touch with this person, and he might interview you a lot about your trip. And so from that, we kind of waited a few months and got the names of 3 people, a lot of names, but the names of 3 people that we wanted to feature. Was we were looking at this story. You have to do 8 episodes. Every episode is about a half an hour long. And so we kind of featured, there was 2 groups of people that were going to leave. One, if you've listened to the podcast, you kind of know this already. One is Erin Brennan, who was, as you were talking about a little bit earlier, was part of Warrior Expeditions. She had just gotten out of the Army, and was going to go on this 2-month hike across the state, with Warrior Expeditions. She was an intelligence officer. It was really, really great. And beforehand, we went down and talked with her down in Southern Pines, where her home was. And we're like, great, okay, yeah, okay, we're going to follow you. The next thing was we were like, well, we want to find some other people for 2 reasons. One, for the story, is that you have one person, she's a veteran, she's really great, she's just going to go after it. She's tough, and she's just really, really matter of fact. Then we found Aaron and Lexi Harris from Tennessee, who were like newlyweds, and they really hadn't hiked much. They hadn't prepared much, but they were like, we're just going to kind of do it and see what happens. So they were a great change of pace. They saw things a lot differently. And this is the producer side of me too, is that I was like, well, if somebody doesn't finish the trail, we'll have another group that's going down there. We don't have to wait another year to find somebody that's going to do it. And so I found them, and they were really wonderful. And the way that we kind of set it up was, to tell a big story like this, one of the great things about Our State Magazine is the visuals, the photography is really, really great. It's also something that you can sit there and it stays on your coffee table for a very long time. And reading a story, the words is great. And you can paint a really good picture. Some of the best writers, I mean, they really immerse you there. But that's also very hard to do. And I know because I've been writing for them for a while. You also have video. We talked maybe briefly about doing a video on somebody trying to do the whole trail. But we kind of realized this is a really big, broad story that we wanted to just. So it gets very expensive. And also we were like, well, how are we going to follow somebody for 2 months with a camera in the woods? How would we do that? It'd be really, really tough. And so a podcast was really, really great because one, um, you know, when you're telling somebody a story, when you're listening to somebody tell you a story, it is really immersive. You connect with that person. It is something also. If you're wondering why they're becoming more and more popular, it's because, I mean, if you've noticed that you have less and less time, maybe you feel like you're always doing chores or running or, always out, even hiking. You can't stop and read a magazine, like while you're walking down a trail, or you can't really watch a video. If you're watching TV, you're sitting on a couch. With a podcast, you put your earbuds in and you can kind of move along your day. And so you can spend a lot of time. And this whole season on the Mountains of Sea Trail was about 5.5 hours of audio, finished audio. I think I recorded, between me recording and the people on the trail, maybe like 30 hours or 40 hours of audio. I mean, a lot of sound. So we knew this was going to be perfect. And also you can really get into depth. You can get in the weeds on stuff. And so the way that we decided to do it was that obviously I took 8 days to Cape Fear River. I could not take 2 months and go do the Mountains of Sea Trail, unfortunately. So we were strategic and said, hey, we're going to be there. I'm going to meet you at these specific places when you get there. As Betsy mentioned, I do live along the trail. I live in Oak Ridge. So I think Martha Pittman from Oak Ridge is here. So, hey, Martha. But it runs kind of right by my house. So I knew at some point they were going to come to me, which is great. But I said, okay, how about I'm going to meet you at Clingman's Dome when you leave. I'm going to go to Boone when you're in Boone. I'm going to meet you all in Elkin, in Oak Ridge. And then at some point down the road, I'm going to meet you, end up meeting in Goldsboro, in Emerald Isle, which is technically not on the trail. And I will get to that in a minute. And then at the end, when you finish, I want to be there when you're at the end. So I knew I would meet at these strategic points. I would bring my microphone. I would interview. And so I knew that they could kind of keep this audio journal as they went along the trail. So I gave them some tips and saying like, hey, I need you to tell me where you are, if you know that, and when you are, if you can remember what day it is. And then just tell me what you're feeling, or tell me. And Lexi telling me like, hey, this is quite a day we're having. They were like, I like to refer them as like ruthlessly positive. They were like, there was one point they were in their tent and you just hear this rain coming down, and they're like, hey, this is what a wonderful day. And you're just hearing like this thunderstorm outside. Recorded the whole way along the trail. And so after 2 months of that, of meeting up with them and going down, I was able to kind of put together this thing. And we knew, the thing about doing a big project like this is that, we wanted to layer on as much as we could. So it wasn't just going to be a story about, these 3 hikers as they started and just kind of walked their way across North Carolina. I knew I wanted to touch on, the first episode touched on the history, and I think you all heard a little bit about Howard Lee. I interviewed Howard. He was great. I interviewed Alan Householder, who was one of the first people who hiked the entire trail, who through hiked it. Episode 2 was going to be about Aaron and warrior expeditions and what it means, how the trail can be therapeutic. The next episode was about Aaron and Lexi and kind of like, what does it mean? It's a little bit more about personality. I mean, you're just married and you're in this like literally the honeymoon phase. And then all of a sudden you spend all of your time in sort of a stressful environment in the woods, doing something very strenuous with your significant other. That might accelerate the pace of you getting used to your spouse very, very quickly. Episode 4, I knew I wanted to do, and I don't know if Bill and Bob are on this call, but they, a while back I did a story, I did this story about Elkin, and I just knew that's the great, people, you just sort of assume like, how does a trail happen? I don't know why you just walk in the woods and you're like, it feels naturally, it feels like it's always been there. And that's obviously the struggle that I know a lot of you have, and the hard work that you all put in to create even a little bit more of the Mountains of Sea Trail. I really wanted to highlight that and show what they're doing in Elkin there. And then moving on to the next episode, the roadside. It is one of these things that is you keep, right now the trail has to run along the side of a road in a lot of places. And that ones you see, but it also puts you kind of it gives you a perspective of North Carolina, or puts you in a world that you see that you maybe you drive past every day, but you're never experiencing up close, that you get when you're walking along the trail. Episode 6 is Eastern North Carolina and Roseboro and everything that's happening down there, making a trail town in a part of the state that doesn't have a whole lot of trails. Episode 7 was about the kayaking, which ended up being really, really hard for some of our folks. And then episode 8 was the end and everything that happened later. And I knew a lot obviously happened in the year since I recorded all this in 2019. We were going to release it in 2020. I did want to check back in with everybody a year later. And a lot happened in that year, as you all know. So that's kind of how we all set it up. And just the last kind of thing about how it's produced or how we made it was, it was about 40 something hours of audio. And every episode takes about, every episode takes about a half an hour of listening. And when you factor in, it was me and my friend James, my colleague James at our state, who's a producer. He kind of comes in later in the process and gives me a very objective, a lot of notes and that sort of thing from a very high level. But most of it is me editing, mixing, writing, that sort of thing. So between going out and recording everything, going out and transcribing it and logging it and writing it, and then mixing it on a in a computer program, and then remixing it and doing it again and editing and that's right, cutting and that sort of thing. Every episode takes about 40 hours, I would say, on average, to produce 1/2 hour episode of this podcast. So we had a lot of time to get that done, and we kind of released it last year. And one of the amazing things about it was that kind of experience was really therapeutic for me. And I know that right as we started to release it in the springtime of 2020. Was when the pandemic hit, and it was in its earliest phases. And, I didn't know, I didn't take a reporting trip for our state for about a year. But I had all this audio, and you can kind of listen back to a little bit of a different time, where people are in the woods and they're meeting trail angels and they're meeting people and that sort of thing. And one of the great things about it is, you learn really how therapeutic that really is. Warrior Expeditions is basically, a very therapeutic organization. They don't promise much, but they know by getting veterans out into the woods, there is something about a walk and being in nature and trying to let things go that after a little bit, something kind of clicks or something there's a release that happens. And it's different for every single person. And I think listening back to this journey, was really good for me, and I think it really helped me a lot. Another thing was, I learned a couple of things about it. And one, to me, hiking is a very solitary activity. At least it always has been to me. I feel like if I need to go out and relax myself, I'll go out in the woods, or I'll go for a run on a trail, or something like that. And I'll bring along my kids too. They love out in Oak Ridge, the Cascades Preserve, which is now part of the MST. But I was wondering, one of the things about it too was I was thinking to myself as I was putting together, like, it really is not the Mountain to Sea Trail is not a solitary thing. It is not an isolating experience to hike a part of it, because there are so many people behind every twist and turn. I know a lot of you out there are very involved in your own communities, holding trail days. You are all repairing, building, talking with landowners, always thinking about the next thing, always thinking about the future. And the trail angels that really make this happen. I know that's been a little bit of a struggle this last year because of the COVID restrictions, but I also know that there are so many of you that really make everything possible for anybody who wants to hike the whole thing, or even a portion of it too, that will go out of your way. I even talked to Mary Stewart, who I bumped into a couple times, and finally said, okay, I need to talk with you and tell me why you do this and everything like that. And she popped up in an episode. Those sorts of things, it's just, you're really, to me, one of the hard things about telling a story sometimes about a trail is you're a little bit in your own head. And when I was on the Cape Fear River, I knew this was the case, and that the first couple miles, you're like, wow, look at that tree, look at that bald eagle, look at this, look at all this amazing stuff, a bridge, wow, and then when you get down to the third or fourth day, I don't know, you're just kind of going forward and you kind of settle into a routine. And it's hard to explain kind of the headspace that you're in. And even when you're done, it's hard to explain what's happening in your head. And even the folks that I talked to, I think had a hard time kind of figuring out what the trail meant. And make this thing more than just a trail, that it is really as much as about the people who hike to really make it possible. And I learned so much about that during this process. And I really tried to highlight that as well, because I feel like that is what really sets something like this apart. The other thing is, I think I learned that you have to, you kind of have to roll with things. You know, one of the, when I'll have to show a picture. I'm going to show a couple pictures here in a little bit, but you know, one of the things about the trail was, like my kids were, let's see if I can get a picture up here. So here are some of the pictures from the podcast that I took. These are my kids. I don't know if you can see them. They're running around downstairs with my wife while all this goes on. But that is Charlie in the blue. That's Holly in the pink. And a couple of weeks ago, we did some trails. We had like a trail day out in Oak Ridge where they're building a new section of a trail that will be part of the MST. They came out and they helped kind of put this trail on the other side of a tree. It was a little low spot. They helped me reroute to me and others reroute to a high spot, and they loved the part where they put the sticks on the old spot where to keep people from walking across it. So they were really, really involved. But just knowing, like, even watching that, it's like, hey, the original trail went this way, and now that it's actually there, it's low, it's always muddy, let's reroute it a little bit. It's this living, breathing thing that I learned. And just knowing too that, like, even with Aaron Brennan and everything, I mean, you know, their plans changed. So if you want to see, I think I have a picture up here. I may not have included it. This is Aaron right here in the green, standing over her bike. That's another Thomas Weinheimer's on the right. He's got the big old beard. They hiked together for a while. They hiked, biked, and paddled the trail, and they kind of stuck to a loose interpretation of the trail. So not official finishers, but they that was kind of this new pioneer project from the Warrior Expeditions, where they try to make it sort of a triathlon trail. And one of the things they learned is that kayaking, Thomas is a really good kayaker. Aaron had never done it before. And I don't know if you can see here, this is a very ominous looking picture from Emerald Isle. They decided maybe to try to kayak up the ICW. Maybe that would be a trip they could take. Again, that's not part of the official MST, but they were like, maybe we could kind of stick to it. They found out that was really, really hard. And so they're actually going to adapt a little bit more and do more of a bike, maybe more of a traditional, you know, hike, bike, paddle, but on the noose, or just maybe hike and bike. You know, this is Aaron and Lexi from the back. This is a Iowa Pass in Goldsboro, where they kind of climbed up off of the Neuse River. They met me at a Bojangles there, so I could interview them. You know, they had to adapt. The kayaking was really, really hard for them, but they had to figure out a way to do it. And you know, there you go. That's Aaron paddling away from me. AARON, I should say. There's two Aarons, which is I would not have done that again, but I can't ask people to change their names. So that's Aaron Harris down there. And you know, I was there at the end when they were coming up the ramp there off the beach. And you know, Aaron Brennan. By the way, that is how, if anybody has ever been interviewed by me for the podcast, Kate, I think, knows this. I tell you, I'm going to get uncomfortably close with this giant fuzzy microphone that has a pistol grip. So poor Aaron everybody had to be subjected to this at one point or another, where you're talking to me and also like 2 inches away from your mouth is a large fuzzy object. You know, and at the end of it, you know, I think one of the things is you wonder about having this nice kind of tidy narrative. You want every story to have like sort of a very beginning, middle, and end. And, you know, the interesting thing was that Aaron and Lexi, they didn't prepare that much at the beginning. At the end of it, they ended up, I was like, how much you been hiking? They're like, not that much. But you know, every once in a while when they were like, there was something inside of them, I think, that they could pull out and use at a specific part where things were getting hard or things were tough and they were like, weren't sure of themselves. And, you know, Lexi said, you know, every once in a while I just think to myself, well, I hiked the whole MST. Like, whatever that is, whatever I got going on, I can do it because I know I can hike across an entire state. It is possible. With Aaron Brennan, I really struggled because I lost touch with her. And I was never able to kind of, after a few months after finishing the trail, I wasn't able to get up with her. And I talked with the folks at Warrior Expeditions. They said, this is what happens sometimes. Veterans are working through a lot of stuff. And so, she's working some stuff out. And, one of the things that I think I learned too is at least, whereas before, I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And I think I even mentioned this or even have told some of you before about this, I was like, why are people walking down my road with like backpacks on? Like, where are they going? And then I was like, oh, that's because it's part of the MST. I got it now. Whereas now, I feel like every time I'm in like my in Oak Ridge, I'm looking around and I'm like, oh, like where could we, I wonder where they could build. And that was exciting. And, I was just seeing them just running around in the mud, and I was trying to help and be a small part of this very big thing. You can plug into this wonderful community, is something that I really learned. The great thing about the Friends Mountain Sea Trail is that, they are a starting place where you can maybe affect change in your community. And so knowing that, a trail is a thing that takes a lot of human hands is really, really great. And I'm so grateful that I had this experience to put together this podcast. It is called Away Message. I think I forgot to mention that. Like bad promoter that I am, I forgot to mention that it's called Away Message. You can listen on Apple Podcasts. Basically, whatever you listen to a podcast on, just search for Away Message, and you will find it. We actually made our logo this year to kind of mimic the MST signs, like the kind of the retro with the mountains and the orange and the browns, and so that was very purposeful that we did that just for this season. But you can listen there, and the great thing is if you have any questions for me, and I'm going to take a couple questions now, I think, but if you have any questions for me, you can reach out to me, and I'm really, again, just kind of grateful that I had this experience and was able to tell this story. And like it is the story of North Carolina, about people helping each other, about coming together for this big common good, about this public good that we don't think about. People, maybe we feel like maybe we're a little more individualistic than we used to be. We feel like we're going to do things on our own now. And I think that the story of the MST is that you cannot really do this without help. You can't hike it without help. You can't build it without help. You can't dream about it without help. You can't do anything without help. And so the trail is more than just a trail, it's a community. And I can't thank you enough for allowing me to plug into your community and tell your story. It has been a wonderful experience, and it has been by far one of the most gratifying things that I've done, things that I've made over my career in journalism. It's been very satisfying, and I can't thank you enough. And I think we have like time for a couple questions here. If I think Betsy might be queuing some up.
We do. If you guys want to put some questions in the chat, that would be great. Thank you so much, Jeremy. That was really exciting, but I guess I can ask you while folks are putting some in. Was there anything that you found that you really didn't expect to find as you were doing this series?
That's a really good question. I think I did not know the extent of the trail angels. I have done stories. I did my very first big magazine story that I did was about a guy from Charlotte, Trevor Thomas, who you may have heard of. He's blind, and he hiked the entire Appalachian Trail a long time ago. And I just kind of thought, that you do the AT, you're just sort of like, okay, there's mail drops, and you're in the woods the whole time, and you maybe here and there you get like you hitch a ride with somebody, but you don't really realize you think it's like there's people around you, but you just kind of think it's like, this is kind of a thing that you just sort of do on your own. You plan for it and you're out, and it's about your own personal logistics. And what I didn't really realize about the MST is that really it is the trail angels that make it all possible and help. And there were so many good stories, especially Aaron and Lexi, I think, because while Warrior Expeditions sort of was there along the way to make sure that sort of their veterans wouldn't fail. They're tough, but they also make sure they were there. I think Aaron and Lexi really relied on a lot of trail angels and found a lot of trail magic along the way. So the people that they found along the way that help put them up and give them rides and drop them off on different sections and even leave things behind for them and that sort of thing. I think that was the thing I didn't really expect along the way.
You mentioned that you've got 2 wee folks that are running around the museum. Janet was asking if there are spots that you think are specifically great for smaller kids. We know you haven't hiked the whole thing, but kind of from your perspective, and I'm kind of reframing the question a little bit to think about, your experience with the whole state of North Carolina. If you were thinking to making it, more of an outing that smaller kids might enjoy hiking, but also really be intrigued with what they could learn while they were out there.
Yeah. I would say the thing about, I always kind of, my rule of thumb with the kids is that we try to go somewhere that's short and a place that we can bail on in case they're just not having it on that particular day. The thing to me is anywhere that's like close by, I usually try to start somewhere close and then branch out. So we've done, again, in Oak Ridge, we've done Cascades Preserve a number of times. We've hiked the new section there as part of the that they're building a bunch of times. As far as that, I would stick to sections in parks because you got bathrooms, you've got a lot of these loops in case you want to come back, you can kind of come back. And there's other things to do. So, and then past that, and this is, not for kids, but just as another portion of it is, the MST is kind of a nice brand name. It's sort of like this idea that you, I don't know, it's like the interstate. Like, I don't know, you're kind of conditioned now. You're like, wait a minute. And blue shield tells me like this is a big road that I can take. The MST is kind of like that as well. And that now there's a lot of smaller sections that are part of it. So, I've gone out and done parts of like the Riverwalk in Hillsborough. That's its own continuous thing, but it's also part of the MST. And so to me, the interesting thing is like if you want to explore different parts of the state and go to towns and places you've never been to before, looking where the MST goes and saying like, that's a good section of trail that's going to be there. I know that's there and well maintained. It might help you explore different other places like that. So that to me is maybe I would start. I would just, depending on how old your kids are, just be ready to like, my daughter should be like, my legs hurt. And we're like, we're a quarter mile in. So I'm like, well, if we just went to the park, we went to a state park, there's other stuff that you guys can do here and not just hike. And then as they get older, you can kind of branch out. I would just say, go broader and broader as time goes on.
And that kind of leads a little bit into Linda. Linda's question was that she's new to hiking and she's feeling a little overwhelmed. And, Jeremy, what you just said with your kids pretty much applies to that too, is just kind of start someplace that feels really comfortable and go small. I mean, you found the trail, because you saw people walking past your front, your home.
Yeah.
And, I'm just going to shamelessly plug our book, Don't want to, try and tackle 1,175 miles. The book has 40 hikes. They vary in length and in difficulty, and that's a really, really easy way to get out and see the breadth of the trail in a really comfortable way. So,
yeah. And we actually did an episode on this as bonus episodes. We did 8 episodes, and then we did a bonus with Jennifer Farr Davis, who is a great hiker. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of her. And it was basically that. It was like, hey, you're hearing about people hiking all the time. Like, how do I do this? Like, how do I go and start if I've never hiked before? Okay, and then I've hiked a little bit. How do I take the next step? And then the next step, and the next step. And then like, what should I do? And like, I'm scared. I'm afraid of it. And it's like, if you can go for a walk, you can go for a hike. Like, she was really, really great. And in about a half an hour of listening, it really was, we did that because I knew I wanted to present this as something that like, there's all different kind of skill levels out there. Only 100 and something people have ever hiked the entire thing. So that maybe is probably not an option for a lot of people, but doing a day hike or a multi-day hike, or just going out for a walk in the woods is definitely, there's these different levels. And so there's this bonus episode there. And I would obviously recommend any of the books that you all are putting out as well.
Absolutely. That is a really great resource. Jen is a great advocate for getting everybody out. I think she said that hiking is just a fancy name for walking. So I think we can all generally walk. It's just kind of figuring out where to aim ourselves. One last question. I think Jack asked if there were any plans for a 5th season.
So So I do have a little bit of news about that. We did 4 seasons. And we were trying to think of like what we're going to do for another season, like, because I think we really enjoyed this long taking one topic and doing a kind of really just going deep on it. And so we really hadn't, it was really, really hard. I mean, I think during the pandemic, we all kind of had 2 or 3 different jobs at our state, between the podcast and updating the website and doing that, just a lot of stuff. And so we really even had, I hadn't had the time to think about what a 5th season would be like. And then about, this news is kind of going public now, but as of next week, I'm actually leaving our state. I will be, my byline, I've been writing there for 10 years. I'm hope to continue doing that just on a freelance basis. So you might actually even see it in the magazine a little bit more. I got a job at Wake Forest, working for the program for leadership and character. And I start that here at the end of the week. So right now, the podcast is kind of on hiatus. I'm kind of looking at hiatus. I don't want to say we're done with it, but I hope to kind of jump back into it at some point. But yeah, our state's been really, really good to me. But it was a new opportunity that's coming a long way, and I'll be working a half an hour in the other direction in Winston-Salem. So for now, there's no plans for a 5th season, but we were kicking around some ideas. So hopefully we can maybe make that happen in the future.
Cool. If you have any other questions for Jeremy, you can always get them to me and I'll try and pass them to him. But we are so very thankful for all that you've done and all that our state does to support the MST.